All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to episode three. As opposed to episode two, now you can see us in 1080p. All
Yay!
thanks to the free trial that StreamYard kind of made us uh, enroll for. But we're taking a look at the positives from here. The duck's gone. So now we have our cool logo up there, and we're just gonna go crazy with this as long as we have the free trial, right, Sean?
That's right. Production value is increasing with every episode. Right
I
now,
like
what's
that.
going to happen? I think in the not too distant future is because Streamyard's kind of expensive, is we may have to go back to WebEx at some
Yeah.
point. Right?
I
So
don't know. We
don't
got to
get your
find the
hopes up.
system. Yeah, we got to find the system, Sean. This well,
That's right.
here's keeping everybody at the edge of their seats to try to figure out what we're gonna do in the next episode.
That's right. Hey, this is we're a punk podcast, right?
Absolutely, from our band room, like our
That's
music room,
right.
right? All right, so coming to episode three, and this is something that's all within your area.
Mhm.
We named this like "Do Androids Dream of Academic Integrity, uh, Ethics, Equity, and AI?" Right. So
Right, right.
that's
And
what we're
hopefully
going at.
people are paying attention because these are all sort of riffs on sci-fi themes, right? So this is how we keep ourselves entertained. We come up with
Right.
cheesy puns as titles for podcasts.
Agreed. And that's always super fun. So for to theme out this episode, this will more be on the use of AI in education that ideally demands more policy. It requires intentional ethical designs that reflects like shared values across students, faculty, staff, and administration, right? Well, I don't think we've said it enough, but this is not just for students and faculty. This is for staff and admin, right, Sean?
Right. It's shared practice and cultural commitment. And the
Hmm.
university is going to have to, for us to work this, and particularly if we want to reach out into the community or even K through 12
Absolutely.
and kind of be touchstones for this, we
Mhm.
have to develop the shared practice and the cultural commitment at the same time. So that's ultimately what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you brought in the thing about the community as well, because at the end of the day, I think we would also that would be a big outreach for us as well. We want this to be like a north star for everybody in the River Valley community and beyond,
Hmm.
right? We don't want to restrict ourselves to anything. Well, that brings us to the first part of this episode, which is the seven ethical domains of concern, right?
Hmm. Yep. And there are seven. And this is based on, since we do book sort of ads, AI and the Future of Education by Shaw, AI
Hmm.
for Educators, Matt Miller, AI Ethics, which is a textbook
Hmm.
by Boddington, Teaching with AI, which seems to be a touchstone for us. And then everything we pulled out of the conference in Florida.
Right.
So they had sessions on ethics, et cetera. And I think one place to begin, and we mentioned it in the last podcast, and we keep talking about this North Star. We have to get real clear on where AI touches and where it will never touch.
Right.
Some things always have to be human, so we don't want to make everything AI. And
Hmm.
that was actually based on a recommendation from IBM
Hmm.
at that conference, and it's
Right.
something I think that stuck with both of us. Wouldn't you say that? Yeah, AI is great, but it can't do everything, and it shouldn't do everything.
Agreed. Yeah,
So
and I'm with you on that 100%. And with IBM as well. And I thank them for asking the question because sometimes we get a little deluded in thinking that AI is going to be everywhere, like AI is
right,
everywhere.
yeah.
But yeah, is it though?
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be. I mean, and
Hmm.
and that brings up ethics. Then we have to develop rules, but we need to be aware that ethics isn't just about rules. It's about deciding in advance what parts of the educational experience remain human led
Right.
and where AI might augment work. And so
Hmm.
that's the North Star model. And so to do this responsibly, we have to understand the areas that are touched by these ethical concerns. So, for instance, when you look at the ethical concerns, this is mostly coming out of that Boddington ethics book.
Hmm.
There's bias and discrimination because AI is going to replicate social inequities. And unless it's actively audited and supervised, you're going to get all these weird cases. And that's why we dwell on academic misconduct shouldn't be the only thing about AI because studies, for instance, indicate, and we've talked about this, that the AI checkers will flag students on the autistic spectrum.
Right.
or
We have.
particularly in students that speak English as a second language,
Mm-hmm.
because they actually speak and write English better than those of us who grew up, particularly learning English in the
Mm-hmm.
South, right? I mean, that's a whole different kind of English.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't automatically just create these gatekeeping rules that say, hey, you violated AI, you go to jail. That's not how it works. At the same time, the biases and that revolve around, for example, what was it? I think isn't it Copilot now, but it had a different name and it was released on Twitter and became horribly racist. Uh,
Mm-hmm. I
you know
think
what
I
I'm
remember
talking about?
that one. Yes, I
I forget
remember.
the name of it,
Yeah, that's true.
but it was a Microsoft
Yeah.
product, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
eventually becomes Copilot. I assume they fixed
Yeah.
that, but it was released on Twitter, and within like 72 hours, it joined the Nazi Party,
Yeah.
right? And so these things are going to reflect back our biases and create
It
patterns
was
of
called Tay.
discrimination.
I'm sorry.
Tay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that it's going to reflect back our biases and discriminatory patterns as well. We have
Mm-hmm.
to pay attention to the fact that if we're even going to use AI, different tiers of paid service within AI
Right.
are going to get through checkers and they're
Mm-hmm.
going to do different things. So the students who can't afford AI at the higher level are going to get trapped into the ethical consequences or the dilemmas for the rules we create.
Yeah.
Another one is privacy and surveillance. And this is more on the staff and administrative side, and that is who has access to the data.
Mm.
So if you write, if you, for instance, load in, and faculty would be affected by this as well. If you load in your student papers or student grades into an AI, by default it becomes part of the LLM.
Yeah.
So the AI systems, whenever you adopt them, they need to be FERPA and HIPAA compliant. You need
Mm-hmm.
to verify that. Even turn it in. We were talking
Right.
about turn it in.
Yeah, I was about to
If
bring
you
it
don't,
up.
yeah, well, we're gonna bring it up later. But if you don't click two boxes, and then somewhere over in the temple of computers in the library, if they don't click a box, then everything you load in goes into the LLM as
Yep.
well. I mean, am I wrong about
Which
that?
is crazy, yeah, right. And it blew my mind when we heard like the lady over there say that, and we were like, "Wow, okay, so
Are you sure you
okay,
want to do that?
yeah, we did not know that."
Right. So another ethical consideration is autonomy and human oversight.
Hmm.
So in essence, automation without human oversight is dangerous.
Right.
It is inherently dangerous.
Hmm.
That's what leads to the proliferation of the false narratives. The hallucinations become treated as real. AI might, even if it's used in advising, suggest a student drop a course without input from the teacher.
Right.
It has all they used it in predicting recidivism rates for prisoners considered for parole, and
Mm.
it turns out that in playing the odds that it became discriminatory in that respect. And
Mm.
so you always have to have human oversight. It has to
Yeah.
be also transparent and explainable.
Mm.
You need to help students understand exactly how and why AI made that decision. So
Right.
on the student side, students are evidently kind of watching some of these podcasts too. So we're
Absolutely.
going to get to a section that's directed specifically to
Hmm.
you, but you as students in particular need to be transparent in your use so you don't get caught up in all this. If you
Yeah.
don't know what the rule is, ask your professor.
You're right.
Always ask,
Okay.
because they may say, oh, it's okay if you use it for this and not for that. Right now, we don't have specific policies, so it's kind of
Hmm.
the Wild West. So always ask. Um, Equity and access, we have to make sure it's available to everybody. That's good, may be a problem for us.
Hmm.
In addition, there's a process of dehumanization, meaning the student submits something written by AI and then the faculty member loads it into AI to be graded.
Right.
And before long, you have the AI talking to itself through the grading process.
Yeah.
And we actually heard an example of that in business and industry where one of the businesses, they were speaking to the corporate execs and they were talking
Oh
about
yes, that was so funny.
how the worker evaluations, any evaluations had improved dramatically at this organization, and it was because they were doing certain things, and they went and asked the managers and the employees, well, why are these better? And they said, well, we're using AI to write them. And then they went back to the execs and they said, well, we've been able to offer better feedback on the evaluations. And they said, well, what are you doing? They said, well, we're using AI to
Yeah,
take in all those evaluations and write reports back to the managers. So
that's
AI
true.
was effectively running the corporation at that point, right?
Absolutely was.
So,
And there was another funny line that somebody had said over there. It was more like, assessments are more like you writing a document which says, I did good, and
right,
somebody else grading that you said, he did good or he or she
right,
did good,
right.
right?
So you can't dehumanize. It's always got to be
Yeah.
mentorship and feedback. We talked about that last time.
Hmm.
You need responsibility and accountability. So that's really where the policy comes in. We're
Hmm.
going to say these are the rules. This is who is accountable,
Right.
because that would be part of the rules. And
Hmm.
so what we then have to do is and this is what we're doing through the policy group, is we're saying, all right, if these are the areas that are touched, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start setting these boundaries and figure out where these lines are.
Hmm.
That's why we want to talk to every department. And if you're
Right.
in those meetings, you'll recognize that we're asking you questions about where's the line.
Right.
That's really what we're trying to do, because we
Hmm.
don't want to create this blanket policy that doesn't have adaptability and flexibility, first to the changes in the technology, and then next to specific departmental concerns and requests.
Hmm.
So we want flexibility, particularly on the ground. So one of the things we may recommend in a policy is that as long as you take all these characteristics into account, even at the departmental level, just tell your faculty to write an AI policy that's very clear, so that if we have to deal with it on the back end, we can say, well, what are the criteria? Well,
That's
it's
true.
right here. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. And like I said, like you'd said, like it's the Wild West at this point and
Right.
nobody knows what's going on. So I think trying to structure and kind of policy things, even if it's for, your department level, I think that'll be a
Mhm.
start than anything else, right?
Right.
And
And
that's
then
gonna give us all of these, that's gonna hit all of these points. And I think it's gonna start making sense.
well, I think so. And I think part of our effort through the task force will be creating a website where we can even put some definitions of these principles up, like the
Absolutely.
7 criteria, and just say, these are the things you have to think
Hmm.
about. And these are
Absolutely.
examples of when it could go wrong.
Right.
Now,
And
in terms of, go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, and just kind of like interjecting a few questions and acting like the
Yeah.
audience over here, because again, you're the person behind this. I'm just here, just listening to you now, right? So,
Well, yeah, yeah. I may be like I may be getting it all wrong. So just for the
so
record.
just like just a question of a few quick things. So, I remember in Florida they kind of talked about having their own GPT system.
Yeah.
And I, from the technological standpoint of thing, I believe that not a structured, but a, stuck GPT system. So one that's just within the campus, having
Right.
a
I think they
GPT
used
system
the
that
word
doesn't send
closed.
closed GPT
Closed
system. Thank you
was
so
what they
much. I would
called
have
it.
never
Yeah.
found that word. Yes.
Yeah. No, it didn't make sense to me until they described it. But go ahead.
Right. So having a closed GPT system would be a better way out. Like, what do you think about it, and what do you think? Like, how do you think as we should tackle that as a university?
Well, I think that would be very, very important. My understanding from the session I went to, because Florida talked about creating their own,
Hmm.
and they've got a massive one. That's why we went to Florida, and that's why all these Yale and all these other universities show up at Florida. It's because Florida really is on the bleeding edge of this.
They are.
Most, for the record, we were asked this question in a meeting with departments. They were saying, "Well, where is most everybody else?" And honestly, the answer is they're where we are,
Right.
right? So Florida is just the sort of the exemplar of what's happening on the bleeding edge. Florida, Harvard, and places like that, and MIT. But if we go back to the closed system, it does several things. For instance, it deals with all the ethical issues in terms of FERPA and HIPAA,
Hmm.
because by default the LLM is internal and it's proprietary.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about external sort of data privacy issues, except for the usual ones, which is people coming into the system.
Hmm.
Um, you also, at the same time, you kind of create opportunities to create systems that do handle advising, but you still need the human oversight. For instance, you could create a system, and I think they do this in Georgia, where the student says, "This is what I want to major in," and then the AI pieces together from the curriculum exactly the kind of classes you need. It's kind of like
Hmm.
our course maps,
Yeah.
but it can tailor it to very, very specific kinds of wants and desires. So a student may want to major in pre med, but at the same time end up in psychiatry.
Mm.
Well, what it would do is it would then say, all right, well, these are the pre med options. You have to do this. But if you want psychiatry, you're probably going to need to do this, this, and this in psych, et
Right.
cetera. And so it can kind of tailor it.
Mm.
Others use the closed systems for things like raising money through foundation.
Mm.
Now, they don't necessarily send out emails through the AI system, but they will create AI avatars that
Mm-hmm.
kind of give updates and talk about what's going on and
Yeah.
create the videos. And so I think what it does is it solves a lot of different problems in terms of ethics because you don't have to worry about the spread everywhere
Exactly.
else.
Mm-hmm.
You can contain it and then set your rules to the contained system.
Right.
And Florida actually indicate you could do this for a couple $100,000
Mm.
because I think, and you're the tech guy, but they were saying you really only needed a couple of GPUs and then some infrastructure
Yeah.
to create an enclosed GPT. And on the research side, that opens up the opportunity for everybody to use a closed system at tech
Absolutely.
to engage in their own research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it doesn't get
Absolutely.
out on the web. It doesn't become part of the
Right.
LLM at Chat GPT, et cetera. So,
Right.
and they encourage that at Florida in particular across all the disciplines. So you have
Mm.
English profs using it, you have art professors using it, and what you do is it goes back to that old gatekeeper system
Yeah.
where you have to request time and then you
Yeah.
get a certain amount of time with certain
Mm-hmm.
token
Mm-hmm.
limits, et cetera. And then once you blow that out, then you're stuck and you have to go
Yeah.
back into the queue. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know. You're the tech guy. Would that
N-
something
No,
like that fit at work
absolutely.
here?
Yeah, I would be all for it. I think it's gonna work very well over here, or anywhere else. Like considering how prevalently it's being used, not just by
Hmm.
faculty, but students,
Students and
staff,
okay,
admin, everybody's using it at this point. So I
right.
mean, I don't see how this is not going to benefit us in any way, shape, or form. That being said, I am also all in for like, getting our own. Facilities over here. So if like I think we were talking about it, and we're thinking about developing like an AI track
Hmm.
in our computer science bachelor's program, and we've kind of requested, or like it was my idea that, or at least like our committee's idea, that we should start a AI lab over here, which
Hmm.
like we have a networking lab, we have a cybersecurity lab, but we still don't have a dedicated AI lab.
Right.
So, we would like to upgrade all of those computers and, make that specifically for AI so that people can train their stuff and not have to like pay online services for it.
Hmm.
And you can containerize everything. You can contain everything, and everything is done in house. And I think like it's very good start because research is being done in AI over here. There are a lot of people like working with under AI research, but we really don't have the facilities right now to work with
Hmm.
it. And shout out to University of Arkansas up there because we did have a talk with them to allow us to use their facilities. So
Hmm.
they have like tons of GPU that the state's given them, and they can share it with everybody in the state. So they've been kind enough to tell us that we can share their stuff, and we can use it as needed. So
Right.
yeah, it would be great to have something in here, but until then, we're kind of leveraging off of other facilities.
Well, independent of the facility side, I think dragging it back to ethics, once again, it does solve some of the ethical problems, but at the same
Absolutely.
time, it makes us sort of a hub for the region
Hmm.
in terms of how you use AI more broadly in the community, because we know people are using it in the community as well.
Right.
It could be a K through 12 sort of opportunity to
Hmm.
teach them ethical use. Could be an opportunity to create multiple different kinds of classes as they change gen ed. It may
Hmm.
be that this needs to be built into a separate kind of gen ed class.
Right.
I mean, in general, then what you do on the ethical side is
Hmm.
you have to, like I mentioned, you have to build that cultural practice in.
Yeah.
And universities can, if they tie into the community, be that beacon of cultural practice. This is
Absolutely.
how you use AI. You know
Absolutely.
what? We can even come and show you. Why don't you bring your class in and we'll
Exactly.
show you our AI and we'll show you
Yes.
how we use it and we'll show you the dangers of using ChatGPT
Hmm.
or DeepSeek or some of
Right.
these others,
Agreed.
particularly DeepSeek.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't use DeepSeek,
No,
kids.
no.
Don't use drugs and don't use DeepSeek. But but the in general, it provides a really important opportunity to shift the culture of the river valley as well, I think, and move
Absolutely.
more toward ethical use.
Mm-hmm.
Because right
Agree.
now, it's not just about the university, it's about K through 12, it's about the
Yeah.
students in both
Mm-hmm.
spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about the community. Because I think the Wild West sort of feature of it is what creates the fear and concern. And in many respects, it may even drive some of the unethical use out of just a lack of awareness because nobody's talking about it.
Agreed.
Nobody's saying this is how you
Mm-hmm.
use it.
Agreed.
So,
And yeah, and that's where, like, if we have like an AI center of whatever you want to call it, center of excellence, or like, a
mhm,
space, a safe space where somebody who's scared about AI can come in and, speak their hearts out and say, I'm really
yeah,
worried about AI. Or if somebody's super enthusiastic about it, they can come in and, they can show us how they're using AI. So, we can hold on to that, like, that ethical standard of being like, this is probably like you should rethink the way that you're going forward. Or you can also, like, it can help to relieve the stigma that's around AI
hmm
as well. Like,
right.
there is social stigma, and I believe that, once we kind of drag back to the ethical aspect of AI, that stigma is slowly going to go away as well.
Right. And all the while teaching people that bias and discrimination, privacy,
All right.
autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
transparency, equity, dehumanization,
Yeah.
responsibility, and accountability. Here's one way to encapsulate it, because I think we need to talk to students at some point about this,
Yes.
is that um, ultimately, if you change the culture in a particular way and you act as that beacon, you can actually ameliorate some of these other problems that we see as well, because we have to become more reflexive about this just in our daily lives as well. And I'm not trying to be pie in the sky. We just know that's how social change more broadly occurs. And I would add also, people tend to think that we have to rely solely on the computer science people to do
Mm-hmm.
this. And
Mm-mm.
in fact, I think that's a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
Not to pick on the computer science people, but what you need is you need the humanities, you need the behavioral scientists, and
Exactly.
you need those people
Mm-hmm.
to lead on the ethical side. And that's
Absolutely.
why, if you're paying attention to the podcast, sometimes I'm the guy who says, "Wait, let's slow down," even though I
Right.
seem like a
Mm-hmm.
cheerleader sometimes. That's what you need, the Jiminy Cricket, the consciousness
Right.
that, or the conscience rather, that kind of
Yeah.
whispers in the ear of the computer science people, say, "Are you sure you want to do that?"
Yeah. And again, it's like everybody coming together on this. That's
Right,
important, right? And again, I know computer science people get really excited about things, and we think that let's not stop anywhere. Let's just keep going, and
right. What's it?
um,
What's
but
that
but
quote
we have
from?
to.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Go for it.
No, I was going to say, what's that quote from Jurassic Park? You spent so much time figuring out that you could do something, you never stopped to ask the question, should you do it?
Right. Yes, that's the
Right.
question, right? And it's
Right.
it's just like, that new toy that you kind of want to play with, and you want to keep playing with it until
Right.
you find the next toy to play with.
That's right.
Well, that kind of leads us, because again, like, we did talk to the students, and we believe that the students are central in the whole
Mhm.
rollover here. So what are some of the ethical implications you'd say there are for the students over here?
Well, I think for the students, and this is specifically to any student who might be using and doesn't know what they're supposed to do, I would say stay tuned, because that's the culture change is going to be a little bit slower. But I would rely pretty heavily on your professor and just ask your professor, what is the appropriate use here? One of the things we found from the survey is that, for instance, use of it for brainstorming or process oriented things, they didn't see that as inherently harmful. It was really more in product focused.
Hmm.
So you may want to also talk to your professors about whether or not you can use a notebook, because you can create your own notebook LM by loading in all your notes and materials that you have related to the class, and then just ask it questions.
Hmm.
So even if your professor isn't doing it, you still have the flexibility to do it. So I would say, in terms of the students, beyond those 7 broad principles, what we need to do in terms of student use is you need to think in terms of honesty. What is, if there is a rule, then what is the rule? If you don't know what the rule is, then be honest about it, to disclose it. Because I don't think anybody's really looking to put you in the penitentiary over this, or to kick you into academic misconduct. It's really more about Are you following rules of academic honesty? Are you essentially engaging in something shady? Did you use Chat GPT to write an essay and then you're trying to pretend you wrote it?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, and I tell my kid this when he does something stupid, which he does. I say, look, just be honest. Just tell me what we're dealing with so that we can figure out what the fair consequence is.
Mm,
If you lie, then the consequence gets worse. It's
right.
like with Nixon. I don't know if you remember, it's not the crime, it's the cover up that always gets you.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so don't cover it up, just be honest and
Yeah.
ask when you don't know.
Mm,
Another thing I would warn students about very, very clearly, and I have this concern more generally about students, is they don't seem to be aware of the concern over privacy. This
mm,
is true over social media, but it's also particularly true with AI. Uh, you are sharing whatever you're doing with part of a larger system, and it becomes part of the larger system. And yeah, you may think, well, I'm a needle in a haystack, and then they'll never pick me out. But here's the danger of AI: you can have a million haystacks and ask one specific, very targeted question, and it will find you in less than a second. That's what AI does. AI sorts through patterns and data,
true.
and it will narrow down. I mean, am I crazy in thinking that
That is
let's say they
absolutely right.
loaded in all the information from everything, and
Hmm.
then they threw it in a big sort of model, and then you said, "Hey, find Sean Huss in this." It would take less than a second for them to
Hmm.
find me and everything about me.
Absolutely.
Just
It
doing
it
that,
can even create a digital twin for you, and that's
right?
the thing. So it can say that Sean has asked these questions. So which means so it can do deductions on you, and
Right.
it can make a whole profile on you, and it's crazy. But
Rapidly,
that's how good it is. Yeah. Oh yeah. Within a
rapidly.
few seconds. Yeah.
I mean, so in essence, that's one of the dangers is the more you share with AI about yourself, the more likely it is that this could happen. The
Mhm.
digital twin stuff actually terrifies me a little bit.
It
I
is
didn't know you were going
true,
to go
bro.
there, but let's
Yeah.
be honest about digital twins. They can mimic you,
Yeah.
right? They can
Hmm.
if they get
Everything.
they're better with more data. So if
Oh
they
yeah.
scrub social media,
Hmm.
they look at how you wrote before, they do all those things. They can write like you, they can mimic you, and if they have enough
Absolutely.
imagery of you, they
Oh
can
yeah.
even fake
Create their
it,
own avatar.
create an avatar that's you
Hmm.
and talk like you. So
Absolutely.
don't share with the
That's
AI.
great.
Stay
That's
away
great. It's
from.
great. So
Another one is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no. So I was just kind of going to ask you about like where faculty responsibility and leadership responsibility falls over here. But if you want to add something to that point, we can come to this after that.
Well, I was just going to say students also need to think about equity, humanity, and also adapt as well.
Hmm. It's
That
true.
these are sort of guiding principles.
I,
We
yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
punish students,
Hmm.
but at the same time, we want to make sure that students don't create the conditions under which we have to punish them, and that's why you
Right.
have to be honest.
Right. And I don't know if students completely grasp the whole thing about bias and
Right.
in AI, but it's so prevalent. When I see it, I was in a webinar the other day, and there's this person of color over there, and he was saying that you can literally ask ChatGPT or any kind of AI to answer any question as a black person, for example, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And it's going to do that, but you know what it's going to do? It's going to overfit itself just because it doesn't have enough data. It's going to
Right.
pretend to add in extra fluff, and it's going to overfit something
It'll
that's called overfit.
stereotype
It'll
essentially, right?
stereotype it
Yeah.
like crazy, even for an Indian person, or like any other person who is of color or has a different accent or has a different way of speaking. It's going to stereotype itself like extremely crazily, where you'll be like, wait, that's not that can be it, that's stupid, but that's just where we are. And I just want that to be said so that if students are hearing, that this is a thing, and it's pretty rampant. It's out there.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so coming back to our to my next question was, where do you think the faculty responsibility falls in over here?
Well, I think the faculty need to be aware that they can't just be enforcers of academic integrity. They
Mhm.
have to be ethical leaders. They have to also practice what they preach, and they have to be transparent, and they have to be human, and they have to do all those things as well. So the list that I kind of ran through: honesty, privacy, equity, humanity, adaptation. These are all sort of faculty directed as well.
Hmm.
And in particular, I think where the faculty really take the leadership role is by being very clear with AI policies. Like nobody's going to tell you to use AI or not use AI, but
Right.
whatever you do, you have to be very clear on what that policy is.
Hmm.
Um, at the same time, you have to be transparent. So if you use, for instance, AI to create a rubric, I think you need to say, all right, well, I worked with AI based on our class notes to create this rubric, and then I changed these things because AI was dumb. So this is going to be the rubric because I think it does the thing that we need to do. And then
Hmm.
what that does is it tells the students you didn't just use AI. What you did was you used AI to generate something which you in turn edited and tailored specifically for use in the class.
Right.
And that's how they're going to learn to do it.
Hmm.
If you use AI, you also need to be very aware of literacy, and you need to maybe build that into your syllabus and talk about that in class as well. We had
Hmm.
mentioned maybe doing classes and trying to share literacy. I know the library is going to be on the forefront of this because they're actually trained to do this. This is
Right.
the thing they do in terms of
Hmm.
literacy, information literacy.
Hmm.
But you need to be critical of it, but talk about what role it plays in anything that you generate. So if an AI generates a discussion prompt for you, then one thing you could do is you could say, all right, this is what AI came up with. What do we think? Should we
Right.
change this? And then get the class involved. Let them look
Mm.
for the issues with it. And then by doing that, what you do is you engage them at the same time. They get to answer their own questions.
Mm.
And I will tell you, I actually did. I don't use AI, but in class as a review because everybody wants a review day. One
Hmm.
of the things I'll do in class in my more advanced theory classes, which are tougher and we have to get into weird concepts, I will quite frequently, as a review, not give them a sheet with a list of terms
Yeah.
because I found that to not to work. I'll say, all right, what do you want me to ask you on this test?
Hmm.
And they will brainstorm and then we'll write it on the board and we'll come up with topics. We don't come up with the specific questions,
That's funny.
topics to
Yeah.
ask about on the test. And then I'll go through and say, all right, I'm editor, I have editorial control, so
Yeah.
I might change this,
That's
that, and the
fun.
other.
Yeah.
But this is fine for topics. And I make sure,
Hmm.
they have some choice, but it's sometimes the illusion of choice. I make sure it's whatever I wanted to be on the test to begin
You don't
with.
want to say that out loud.
Right. Right. Well, they're going to see that
Yeah.
anyway if they watch this. But I think they kind of know. But here's the
Yeah.
funny thing: when you do that, they actually come up with some really tough, very fair questions.
Hmm.
Questions that are not that different than I would have asked.
Yeah.
And in terms of performance, their performance does improve, but people who didn't show up to class and didn't study still flunk as well.
Right.
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 So it in the end, it kind of works itself out, and the people get your grade will reflect your level of engagement and
Agreed.
study and all that stuff as well. I think AI could do that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's essentially that's what I think. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. And see, this is why I appreciate like these conversations that we have, like across departments, because there are so many ways that people are like so many kind of tricks and things that their people are using that would be so much more helpful in other departments as well. But just people need to know that, and which kind of leads me to the other topic as well. Like people who are shying away from AI, like if you bring me your non AI class. I can show you the ways in
right.
which you can, yeah, you can like, spruce up your class a little. Maybe you don't have to use everything that I say. You can use this one topic that I think would be really cool if you kind of incorporated that in your class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. Like, that's I bring this up because you brought up that point of like, giving students the options to choose what questions they want to answer, right? I don't think any AI system would have prompted me that solution if I would have asked them
Right.
that. And see, that's where like this humanity aspect of everything is so difficult to bring out, or like it's so difficult to make it go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, and that's something that I really appreciate. Um, but yeah, that's a cool suggestion. And if everybody, more people are listening, like you can give it a try and let us know what you think about it.
Copyright.
Okay, all right, that too.
No, use it. I don't care.
So, and in this conversation, we're kind of going from ground to higher levels, and we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about just ethics, where students are, where faculty is, and Now let's take it up to the next level. So
Mhm.
where do you think, or how do you think administrators and like the system level ethics plays a role in all of this?
Well, I think that's another important feature, and that's something that we tend to, when we think about policy and we hear from the faculty, it's all about controlling academic misconduct, and that's why I keep saying no. That's only part of it. It's a very small part, but it's important nonetheless.
Hmm.
But I think bigger issues are things like at the institutional level, and this is true for staff. We need to define it as faculty, staff, and administrators. What is it going to enhance and what's it going to replace? That's that North
Right.
Star sort of question.
Hmm.
But what we see from the administrators and what we need is clarity in the institutional practices. So we need institutional clarity, and at the same time, no policy should ever suppress local academic freedom. Meaning, very
Right.
simply, that's going to be the tension that plays out. So
Hmm.
that's why I say at the individual faculty level, one way to solve this is you just have an AI policy. It could be
Right.
don't use it. It could be these are the ways you can use it, and then you have to disclose to me and be transparent. But no matter what, at the institutional and the administrative level, we need clarity and leadership on that. And
Hmm.
our task force plays an
Yes.
important role in
Yeah.
that. But
Hmm.
at the same time, we don't make all these decisions. These decisions are
Right.
higher up as well.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is recommended is AI literacy should be universal.
Hmm.
Even if you choose not to use it, you need to know what it is and know how
Agreed.
it works.
Agreed.
And
Hmm.
then if you don't choose to use it, you still should at the same time model what appropriate
Hmm.
use is in the same way that we do with plagiarism, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's just
Hmm.
this is what we need to do.
Right.
So that at the institutional level or at the administrative level means that they're going to have to follow it too.
Right.
So you
Agreed.
can't, for instance, take all the student data and load it into a chat GPT to do an
Yeah.
analysis. You can't use it to data mine to find one particular case. You
Hmm.
can't use it to do assessments to figure out which programs to close or which faculty to lay off.
Yeah.
Those are going to be human based qualitative decisions that
Agreed.
are driven by policy.
Agreed.
At the same time, we need to train faculty. So we not only need it to be universal,
Hmm.
ethically, then that requires us to train faculty for opportunities for integration.
Right.
And then think of ways to redesign assessment and at the administrative level. Then we're going to have
Hmm.
to uphold that rigor. There have to be rigorous standards that are put in place and then promote best practices and transparency. So, once again, on the policy side, if we're using these sort of broader principles
Yeah.
as a way to think about administrative input, it's really more that the administration supports these initiatives.
Mm.
Like you had mentioned, creating the AI center, all of
Right.
those would come out of an AI center.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not just, hey, look, we've got this fancy machine
Hmm.
and we're going to tweak some code. It's really the AI center is going to do all these things. And so what you need at the core is administrative support. It's
Right.
going to have to be financial. It's going to have to be bureaucratic. It's going to have to be
Yeah.
all those things as well. Does that make sense?
It's going to have to be a movement, basically,
No.
in the direction. And yeah, so like you talked about digital literacy, and how important do you think digital literacy or like AI literacy and having an overall ethical campus would be like, are we moving towards it? What are the steps that you think we need to move towards it? And just a short explanation of it, maybe.
Yeah, because I'm long winded. I get
No, 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 you're
it.
fine.
Yeah.
This is
But
interesting, and this is the conversation that we needed to have, and
well,
I'm
and we're
glad
going
that
to
we had
have
it.
other parts of it later, right? So,
Absolutely.
so
Hmm.
particularly on the academic misconduct side. But
Hmm.
I think in general, if we're talking about a more literate and ethical campus, I think they need to become ethics need to become a regular part of the academic life, and
Hmm.
that's going to be tied into writing skills, citation practices, which we already do. But then we're going to have to build in AI, and I think one strategy is libraries.
Right.
I know there is sometimes a move in academia to say, well, you don't need a library anymore; everything's online, and kids buy their own books anyway. And that I think that is a serious disservice and a
Hmm.
misunderstanding of what libraries actually do.
I agree.
Libraries should be the heartbeat of the campus. They are
Hmm.
the space. It is the office that students have on campus. It's their
Mm.
office space.
It
But
defines the
more
campus.
exactly. And so we don't need to co-opt space in the library for stupid stuff. What we
Right.
need to do is we need to use the library and rely on their skill set. And the librarians are very, very good. And they already do talks on this in different classes about what appropriate citations are, how to define what is good information from bad, which sources
Mm.
to use. And I think that's where you go
Right.
is you go back to the core fundamentals. Don't
Mm.
sprawl, don't expand, don't build new buildings or anything. Although new buildings might be nice because I'm in
It would be
Witherspoon.
nice, Sean.
But
I
so
don't mind new
take
building.
that part out. We want new buildings, but not for this. We
Yeah.
go to the library, and
Mm.
in particular, departments based on that can send representatives, and they can create
Mm.
guidance. If
Absolutely.
a specific department needs guidance, they can create that guidance at the local
Yeah.
level. So when we write the policy at the administrative level or the broader level, we're going to have to take all that into account,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
the university is going to have to support that. So if
Yeah.
we want to make that culture change, I think also certification programs.
Right.
Libraries can lead the way on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that would not just be true for students or even staff and faculty or administrators. It could be true for the community more broadly,
Mm-hmm.
where we see this as an opportunity to say, this is a fundamental characteristic of AI. This is kind of how it works. And then
Mm.
you don't have to have, because we were talking about this earlier, you don't have to have the computer science people do all the heavy
No.
lifting there.
Mm-mm.
So, for instance, I could come in and talk, and
Absolutely.
we have Jeff Auger with online
Yeah.
and his leadership skills and his leadership major, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And you pick different people to come in and do different elements of a broader training system
Right.
that reaches into the community as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one way to do it would be to build it in every course.
Yeah.
That would spread literacy quickly. But I think
Mm-hmm.
also you just build it into the basic sort of foundational class we have, something like Tech 1001. And to be honest, we haven't spoken directly with Dana Tribble yet,
Mm-hmm.
but this is something that we might want to pitch to Dana Tribble. Or
Right.
English recommended yesterday having a universal research methods class
Mm.
at the 1 or 2,000 level that wouldn't be rigorous in the ways that, for instance, our methods classes are at the upper division, but it would be
Right.
more about literacy skills, et cetera. And librarians could teach those,
Mm.
for instance. So
Yeah.
we have the resources to do a lot of this, but what we need to do is we need to mesh theory and policy uh, in such a way that it fits within the classroom that builds the culture change that we need, and that's
Right.
going to require infrastructure in a center as well.
Absolutely.
So pie
Absolutely.
in the sky. I
Yeah.
mean, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, again, like you said, pie in the sky kind of situation. It all sounds really fascinating and really good, and it would do us a lot of good if everything would were perfect. But then again, like baby steps at this point. We're just taking like one baby step at a time and trying to just solve one thing at a time. So,
Mhm.
it's ethics at this point, and I'm sure other departments are going to have their views and their say in the whole AI thing.
Right.
And that's why we're going to open up the whole AI in series, and we're going to get people in from other departments to hear from them. Because, again, like
Mhm.
ground level issues are so different than these policies that we put in.
Way
And if
different.
we, yeah, and if we don't know about what's going on in the ground level, I just
Mhm.
feel that people aren't heard enough. So, this is
Mhm.
this is your moment to kind of come here and talk to us about it.
Or send us questions and we can
Or
try to answer them.
absolutely.
Because remember,
Absolutely.
these first podcasts are very broad. So we didn't
Yes.
even cover everything about ethics. But
Mm-hmm.
where the rubber hits the road, there'll be questions like, is citing or paraphrasing from AI without
Right.
citation, is that plagiarism? Can
Mm.
AI be listed as a co author? That creates all sorts of other problems, some of
Right.
which have to do with intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of stuff that we have to hammer out, particularly on the ground level with people who are going to deal with that. That's why we want to have
Absolutely.
additional conversations.
Absolutely. And so that kind of leads us towards the end of episode 3. Sean, can you imagine we are in episode 3? It was just
Yeah, no,
yesterday we
it's
were on episode 1.
that's right. That's right. Well, we're doing what we can to try to get the word out, and
Absolutely.
like we said, it changes gears. So next, I think we were going to have Angela from the library come in, and
Mm-hmm.
she even went to a conference, and she's got a lot of bona fides in this area.
Great.
she's writing the policy for the State Library Association on AI, et
That's
cetera. But
wonderful.
she'll come in and talk about truth, trust, and hallucinations, and
Hmm.
how methods by which are generally why that's a problem and what you can do to kind of help
Hmm.
mitigate some of that in the class. So Forrest kind of changes gears for us. I think we were calling it right now. We may change that. I hallucinate, kind of like
Yeah.
I robot.
Yeah.
Uh, the episode 5, we've talked to Jeff Auger, who used to run like eTech and everything, the
Hmm.
online education. Uh, he's having to get his head around how this applies to online, because
Right.
if you're an online student and AI is just right there for you, essentially you can create the conditions under which AI just does your coursework.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
he's doing some things and trying to get his head around that. I think we call it the lathe of teaching, kind of like the lathe of heaven by Ursula Le
Yeah.
Guin. Once again, these are cheesy, so don't
Yeah.
yell at us. Uh, and then episode 6, that's where we're going to talk to Will Cooper. I haven't done it yet, but I'll reach
Right.
out after this and
Hmm.
just say, hey, would you be willing to come in and talk about academic misconduct? That's where we can get
Right.
into the details
Hmm.
on the ground. And I think we've loosely entitled episode 6,
Yeah.
Childhood's End, dot, dot,
Okay.
dot, of due process. Right. So I don't know. I mean,
All right,
am I
it'll be
covering the
fun.
basis?
Absolutely, yes. And like it'll be pretty. It'll be a good conversation. And I'm kind of looking forward to it. We are gonna open this up, like we are gonna have further episodes. We had originally planned this to be a 10 episode long thing, but I don't think that's gonna stick.
Turns out it's going to be more, I think. And
It will be more.
the goal would be also to maybe share this with the community and share this,
Yes.
because I've had input from people in the community and I've
Hmm.
sat on a couple of community groups. They're trying to get their heads around it as well. So we
Right.
may share these more broadly.
Absolutely. And we can bring in people from the community who you might think would do well to represent it.
Right.
And again, those are things just, a little down the line. But yeah, I'm excited where we are right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to
Right.
be awesome.
Absolutely. I hope you guys are excited as well for us.
Uh,
So here's on to the next one.
Send
We will see you
questions.
then. Yes, absolutely. Send questions.
Email them to Bhaskar.
All right. Yeah. All right. I'll take it. All right.
All
All right.
right.
Thank you, y'all. See you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.